Let us begin the PID webinar. जैसे आप सबको पता है PID मुख्तलिफ टॉपिक्स पे, डेवलपमेंट टॉपिक्स पे और सोशोलॉजिकल टॉपिक्स पे कोशिश करता है कि आपके सामने नए नए रिसर्च, नई नई बातें रखी जाए। ये सब वो बातें हैं जो हमारे पॉलिटिकल स्फीयर में, हमारे कौमी डायलॉग में आती ही नहीं, बिकॉज हम लोग इक़्तिदार के भूखे लोग हैं, हमें कोई नहीं पता क्या हो जाए, बस इक़्तिदार मिल जाए, ठीक है। तो आज हम करेंगे इम्पैक्ट ऑफ क्लाइमेट चेंज पे बात। रेनफॉल पैटर्न्स हमारे कैसे बदल रहे हैं, पानी का क्या हाल है। हमारे पास एक बहुत अच्छे रिसर्चर है फैसल ज़ाई साहब, जिन्होंने बहुत काम किया हुआ इस पे हैं, तो एक्चुअरी और एक्चुअरी फर्म रन करते हैं। पर देखें, रिसर्च एक शौक होता है, रिसर्च एक काम नहीं होता, एक ऑक्यूपेशन नहीं होती, एक शौक होता है। इन्होंने अपने शौक से ये काम किया है एंड आई थिंक इट हैज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट इम्प्लीकेशंस। तो लेट्स ट्राई एंड लर्न about climate change in a little more detail than जो हम शोर मचाते रहते हैं, climate change, पैसे खर्च दो। हमने climate change पे ज़्यादा पैसे खर्च दिए हैं, पर इलेक्शन के लिए पैसे नहीं है। ये भी एक अजीब निज़ाम है, पर चले खैर। आज impact of climate change on rainfall patterns and water resilience of Pakistan, इस पे बात करते हैं फैसल ज़ई साहब के साथ। फैसल साहब, over to you.
So essentially what we're doing is looking at rainfall pattern province-wise in Pakistan, historically and both using future projections. So I've looked at the historical pattern is basically driven, if divided by provinces, but provinces obviously is an arbitrary concept for looking at climate data. It's the best thing we can look at in terms of regional divisions in Pakistan. We will see why this concept of regional provincial divisions in terms of climate aspects doesn't make too much sense. So I'll delve straight into the historical data in terms of how the rainfall patterns have changed in Pakistan. So as I said, I'm using historical data from the CRU. So CRU, for people who are not aware, is the Climate Research Unit, based in East Anglia, UK. So they've done a lot of historical reconstruction of the data. The data that we're seeing is rainfall in this province measured in millimeters. So let's start with Punjab. The historical data going back until 1931, we've got 30-year slots, as we can see. The interesting pattern with rainfall, as we already know, most of the rainfall in Punjab occurs in the monsoon season. So we are basically looking at June, July, August when we receive most of our rainfall. So that already limits us in terms of our risk exposure to rainfall, given how important it is for agricultural growth. Very little rainfall, average historically has been about 20 millimeters from Jan to May. June, it starts picking up, as we can see. So June, July, August, September, we have the rainfall. It goes on quickly after that. Historically, what happened in Punjab is that the rainfall has actually improved from about, say, 80 millimeters to about 100 millimeters. Maybe 95 millimeters now. So from the start of the century, we can see rainfall patterns have remained stable, and if anything, rainfall has improved in Punjab. Sindh, if we apply the same data to Sindh, it's a bit more worrying. Outside the monsoon season, we can see very little rainfall. And during the monsoon season, we started off in the 1930-60, the rainfall was about 70 millimeters on average. And as we can see now, between the last 1991 to 2020 slot, it's come down drastically. So the July rainfall has gone down from 70 millimeters on average to about 45 millimeters, which is scary if people start looking at this data in its reality. So Sindh has actually been drying up throughout the century. And we are exposed because of the monsoon season. We don't receive any rainfall outside the monsoon season in Punjab and Sindh, which is the main area of agricultural growth in Pakistan, the breadbasket, as we'd say. We're already limited to this brief period of rainfall, and even that rainfall in Sindh has been coming down quite a lot. So Sindh has been getting dry, and people living in Sindh, I think, have experienced that in life. They've seen it happen. Unfortunately, it's something which is missed. So Sindh is even more exposed. It has if you go to KPK, now the KPK rainfall pattern is really amazing. It's really different. So what we've seen in Sindh and Punjab is you have one unimodal distribution of rainfall in the monsoon season, but the KPK province has two peaks. So you have one peak according to the CRU data in February to March, so March essentially, and also the monsoon season. And importantly for KPK, the historical rainfall has actually improved a lot in the monsoon season. It sort of stayed static in the March, February to April rainfall season. So as I said, it's basically KPK is different from climatically very different from Sindh and Punjab. It's something which was news to me definitely in terms of climate modeling. Balochistan, again, it looks very different from KPK, but we can see the definite monsoon season here in Balochistan, but the average rainfall is really, really low. So not surprising that Balochistan is a dry, arid land compared to KPK, which is quite wet compared to even probably same as Punjab in terms of the average rainfall. So the message for me there was that we're exposed to just the monsoon season in terms of rainfall patterns, and KPK looks very different from Punjab and Sindh, and something we should use in terms of our strategic water resilience planning going forward. So why are we doing this? I think rainfall for me, because I have been looking at agroclimate as part of my research the last few years. So rainfall is obviously, as you know, important for crops, growing agriculture, apart from anything else. So in terms of what the cropping patterns look like, I've used the MODIS data and used Earth Engine to extract the data and plot it here. So Punjab, as we can see, Punjab, so this green area shows us the cropland in Pakistan. So already shows how arid we are in terms of our greenness. Punjab and Sindh along the Indus Basin is where we have all our cropland. And unfortunately for us, most of this is concentrated in Punjab and Sindh and very little in the KPK area, which is where we have the interesting rainfall pattern. So just looking at this, it shows us how exposed we are as in terms of a food security to the monsoon season and any water that we can store. Now delving a bit deeper, I've looked at the crop season using the NDVI index, which so NDVI basically measures the greenness of an area, which is something what we have here. So again, using similar to NDVI analysis. For Punjab, if we look at the greenness index over the year, so we have two crop seasons, which we are well aware of, the Kharif and the Rabi season. So, which is why we see the two peaks in the greenness that we can pick up from the satellite data, and the peaks happen in February and August. So that's when the cropping seasons peak in Punjab. Now this is looking at average cropping season. So I think if you have different crops, they would peak at different times, but roughly on average, this is what the satellite shows us. So that's Punjab. Sindh again, we have two cropping seasons, February and August and late August. But we are very lucky in terms of how we use it, how we have the ability to do two cropping seasons in a year. So essentially in Pakistan, we should have no food security at the moment, given that we can grow crops twice a year. So two cropping seasons in Punjab and Sindh, which dependent highly on the monsoon rainfall and any upstream river supplies. KPK again is different. I can only see one peak in the cropping season, and that again the NDVI shows that it peaks in July. So this is again looking at granular data so I've always heard of the Kharif and the Rabi season, but in KPK it seems that we only have on average one growing season, which again is a bit surprising, given that we can probably explore in terms of developing a more detailed cropping strategy for KPK. But I think the limit that we have is there's probably very limited land in KPK where we can grow crops. So even though we have good rainfall patterns, maybe land doesn't suit two crops or more detail or more different cropping strategy. Now, so what will the future pattern look like? So again, we have seen in terms of rainfall in Sindh, it's come down quite a lot historically. Punjab has looked stable, if anything improved slightly. KPK has improved. Balochistan, I think, is arid and probably in terms of cropping strategy is less important for us. But anyway, I've looked at in terms of looking for future projections. So we've looked. What I've done is looked at data from the CMIP6, the IP, the latest set of climate set projections that we have from the global climate community of scientists. And because these are distributions, we can look at extremes and the median scenarios. So what I do is start looking at the median scenarios, again, looking at Punjab initially. So the median scenario gives us what we expect to happen in Punjab. So 2040, 2059, the darker gray and the lighter gray is as we look at even more into the future. So the median distribution tells us that rainfall is expected to improve slightly in Punjab, more so as we go forward, into the future. But essentially, we can't. I don't think we should expect any major rainfall pattern changes outside the monsoon season. Similarly for Sindh is a bit more interesting here. The median scenario tells us that the rainfall looks like it might move later into the year. So we have a slightly higher peak in the September-October region on the median scenario, only 10 millimeters extra rain in the median scenario. Slightly higher in June as well, but later the interesting thing for me is monsoon season shifts to later in the year, essentially. Again, this is a median scenario. The median scenario is what we expect around 50% of the time. Again, KPK, again, different pattern. Importantly, what the median scenario tells us is in the immediate future, near future, we'll have slightly higher rain early in the year, and maybe that slows down a little as we move into the future. I can give the projections. So climate projections change, but in terms of the latest projections that we have available to us, this is what the median scenario looks like. Balochistan, again, very little change in terms of how much rainfall will improve. So it's likely to remain as arid as it has in the past. So median scenarios are interesting in terms of what direction we're going, but really in terms of managing water resilience, what we need to, what actuaries or what climate scientists would focus on, I think, is more the extreme rainfall patterns. So I've looked at both the 90th percentile of the future distributions and the 10th percentile. So 90th percentile represents extreme rainfall projections. If we look at Punjab, again, dividing it up into province-wise, it doesn't change much in terms of future scenarios. So as we move more to the future, the extreme scenarios look stable. We have almost double the rain, so 60 millimeters. What we have on average historically now, we have about 70 to 80 millimeters of rain in Punjab. But in an extreme scenario, that rainfall will almost double, just less than double in the monsoon season. So what we can expect is extreme rainfall, and this is something climate scientists have been shouting about for a while. Rainfall is not just going to get changed, the patterns will change, but they will get more extreme as we get into the future. So extreme more in terms of both sides of the distribution. So very high rainfall leading to floods, and extremely low rainfall, as we'll see later on, leading to drought scenarios. So in terms of the extreme scenarios, we can see the monsoon season will get very wet when it gets wet. and that will not just hurt our agriculture and food security, it will also lead to urban flooding. So this is what we need to plan for in terms of exposure to extreme rainfall and floods. So we already are very well aware of floods in Pakistan, given what's happened this year, uh, last year, last year. So this is something we should get used to, unfortunately, in terms of our urban and agricultural land flood resource, flood scenarios. So Sindh again is looking a bit more scary. So if there's 70 millimeters of extra rainfall in Punjab, the climate scenarios show that in the extreme scenario we'll have even more rainfall in Sindh. And this is all over Sindh. So we're not looking at any particular area in Sindh. And as we go more to the future, the rainfall pattern changes. As I mentioned, in the median scenario, we can almost see that the monsoon season might extend in sense to later in the year, and this is what is visibly very clear in these scenarios. So these future 90 percentile extreme rainfall scenarios. So we'll have much more rain when it rains in Sindh. In the extreme scenarios, almost more than double. But what we will also see is an extended monsoon season. So it will extend into September and maybe even October. So definitely late September. So the urban planning and the agricultural food security planning, we need to ensure that any rainfall, firstly, that any extra rainfall that we have needs to be stored. And in terms of urban planning, we need to make sure that there's enough resilience in our infrastructure to handle that. Also in the agricultural lands, but what we do tend to see is urban flooding causing more havoc and leading to more loss. But that's just one side of the picture. So I think Sindh is a scary picture from what I can see in the extreme rainfall predictions. This is not too far off. This is just another 20 years. So most of us here will definitely see. We're already seeing it, and this will become more commonplace. KPK again, in the extreme scenario, we'll see extreme rainfall much earlier in the year, and it gets worse as we go into the future. Now we did see this last year, and again, this is something we should expect to see more often. We should plan for this now. So again, building the right water resources, storage infrastructure, both above, both in dams and other issues. And as we are aware, for KPK, because of the land structure, any floods will not only hurt the agriculture and urban infrastructure, the potential for boulders and melting glaciers, that has a potential to hurt and create havoc in terms of water storage structures or dams, for example. So it's Balochistan I've included here because Balochistan, again, we know has an exposure to floods. We're not really, it's not an agricultural issue in Balochistan, it's more the havoc that we have, the issues that we have as floods hit. And this is, 40 millimeters in an extreme scenario. This, if we haven't seen this yet, we should be reading. This is a nightmare scenario. So if anything else for Sindh and Balochistan, Sindh and KPK for the bad scenario, this is a nightmare scenario for Balochistan. And any pictures that we see of people suffering because of floods is going to become more commonplace, unfortunately, in Pakistan, unless we plan for this ahead. So this is extreme rainfall. So extreme rainfall, we can store the excess water, and we need the water not just for agriculture and water availability for urban use. It's also, we are highly exposed in terms of our electrical dependence on this. If we can use this and reduce our reliance maybe on more expensive furnace or phone, but it's not going to be easy. Now the other side of the picture is extremely low rainfall. So as the climate scientists have mentioned again and again, it's not just rainfall will be extreme, we'll have more floods, we'll have more periods of extended drought. So for that, I've looked at the 10th percentile of the future projections for the next century using the latest set of climate projections. And starting off with Punjab, we expect a decline of maybe 20 millimeters going forward, and it sort of stays stable. But because we only receive rainfall in the monsoon season, so if we miss out the monsoon season, on average we might look at this scenario, but it will obviously, if we don't have enough water reserves, our monsoon season disappearing means impending food security issues for Nigeria. Given our population size and dependence on and food security, it is a huge issue. So decline in rainfall in Punjab, missing out a monsoon season on average 20 millimeters rainfall reduction. Sindh is similar, but if you look at the trough here, it cuts deeper, even though the average is probably slightly lower, but because there's so little rainfall in Sindh outside the monsoon season, Sindh is definitely exposed to water reduction on monsoon season. Lower water resilience, obviously, in Sindh leads to water salinity downstream. I think it's something we've already seen in Badin. So it reduces the potential of the land, as well hurts the mangroves. So Sindh exposure to rainfall on both the extreme scenarios looks a bit extreme. Also, as water upstream in terms of water storage reduces, this gets compounded. So this is just a rainfall pattern. It's also any dependence on the river system also hurts because it's downstream. KPK is, I mean, the droughts will impact us earlier in the year, and that means that it will show up in terms of a major decline in the rainfall patterns. So if it hurts KPK, it hurts all the other provinces, because the downstream at once we have low rainfall in KPK, downstream suffers as much. And worryingly for us is that the drought in KPK will appear early in the year. So it's not the monsoon season that feels the decline or feel the drought impact. It's the early rainfall. So I think it's the rainfall, the rain which is coming from the western front into Pakistan. In the drought season, as we experience more drought, it will be more drier KPK season early in the year, which will definitely make conditions downstream worse for Punjab and Sindh. So another worrying scenario for us to worry about. So we definitely need to ensure we store the water that we have and make very, very good use of it. Balochistan, I've included this again because of Balochistan is already arid and completely dry, but it's obviously going to get even worse in a future scenario. So what this tells us is our extreme scenarios we get hit on both sides. And because Pakistan depends so much on agriculture even now, and as it should as we go forward, we're exposed on both sides of the future of the climate change impact. So we need to plan not just in terms of water storage for agricultural use, but it's also the urban infrastructure planning that will get hit. So that's sharing the data in terms of what I can see. And I've used pictures, no numbers, just because a picture, like I say, it does tell 1,000. It is better than numbers, and picture does include, just tell 1,000 words. So if there are any questions, I can try and answer them, because I appreciate I've gone through the slides relatively quickly. But in conclusion, so historically we've seen Sindh and Balochistan suffer quite a bit. Sindh definitely has become drier over the century. The climate projections tell us that the frequency of droughts and floods will become more and more extreme as we go forward. The KPK predictions are monsoon drying up earlier in the year, Since we expect the monsoon season to extend into the year, so maybe potential for changing the cropping strategy. But ultimately, we are basically faced with an imminent scenario. So this is not something that's going to go away. So the climate projections, the current one and the old ones, probably have the same pitch as Pakistan. We are definitely much more exposed than other countries, given our over reliance on the monsoon season. So we urgently need to build resilient systems, manage flood risks. So this includes not just building water storage, but we need to make sure we remove construction from riverbeds and water flows to reduce the impact of floods. We definitely need to incentivize insurance coverage and disaster risk relief infrastructure. So that's my 2 pence on this. I'll wait for any questions that come this way.
Thank you, Faisal. That was very comprehensive. A quick question before we go to the floor, and I'd ask everybody to raise their hands and please join the discussion and as much as you can. My follow-up was that two things have happened. One is we're going to be drier, and two is that the timing of the rainfall will change. So we have to adapt to that. Both these conclusions are very interesting, but the point is that the debate seems to have taken the direction that we'll have more and more flooding, and that somehow we should be worried about flooding. But your message seems to be the opposite. Have I understood it correctly?
No, the floods are definitely there. They'll be more frequent. So floods are definitely there. So we have both sides of the coin. So rainfall will become more extreme. When I say more extreme, it will become extremely dry in some years, and it will become extremely wet in other years. So the average rainfall that we've been seeing over the historic rate stable, that stability will go away. So we'll see more floods and we'll see more droughts.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I understand that we are expecting more water shortage compared to previous years and more flooding. My question is, what is the adaptation strategy for Pakistan, and do we have funds for that adaptation strategy, expected funds?
Ishan, thank you for your question. So I think the strategy is obvious. We need to, and it's very clear in terms of what we need to do. And I can go through a whole list of what we need, the next steps. But I think this whole issue needs to be prioritized in terms of our, whoever policymakers are. And it's not just building dams and ensuring water aquifers for example, in urban areas, as we've seen in Lahore. Some work has happened. It's basically much more than that. We need to create an infrastructure which basically provides protection to people and provides relief. So its relief comes after, but we need to plan ahead. And for that, I don't think, I'm sure Pakistan can create the funds, but there's enough money out there for this sort of work. So what we need is basically, from what I understand, is we need to create the right package which makes sense to international donors and get our professionals involved, and that professionals across the whole infrastructure, across the whole work stream, and it definitely includes insurance. So we need to have the insurance and the disaster relief infrastructure developed, or they need to go along with this.
Faisal sir, thank you very much. It's really quite wonderful and very elaborative presentation. And let me ask one question, because you are trying to predict and trying to relate the extreme events of rainfall forecast with the food security as well. So, because as you know that especially in Punjab and Sindh and also in KPK, our dominated area depends on irrigation, either on canal irrigation or the groundwater irrigation. So do you think still you believe that these extreme events really can cause food security issue?
Yes, definitely. Food security is going to be a definite impact from what I can see. I mean, obviously, it's my point of view, and it's basically, I think, shared by a lot of scientists and the research papers I've read. And food security for Pakistan will be a major issue going forward. I mean, if we have floods which can destroy large amounts of crops, and we have more frequent impacts, So wheat, for example, wheat, Pakistan is a large grower of wheat internationally. If the crop suffers in Pakistan, the international wheat price will be affected. And unfortunately for Pakistan, we are very dependent on the monsoon season and our river systems. And outside, if we take away if you look at that picture that I showed where the map of Pakistan, the green only is next to the river. If we don't have that water in the river or the monsoon, effectively we are an arid desert country.
PD Muhammad, please go ahead. Muhammad Arfan sir.
Thank you for the presentation, and I basically joined webinar late somehow. So I want to know which future climate models used for these projections, and whether these climate models are basically bias corrected through local data sets with PMDs. And also I want to know that whether the new agroecological crop zonings study is also done in this study, that under the climate change scenarios, which crops are more suitable to grow in which areas, and how we can basically adopt to changing these flooding and drought patterns.
Okay, so that's thank you for the question. That's quite elaborate question. So firstly, the data that I've used is basically from so CRU data is basically for the historical analysis. So Climate Research Unit, University of East Anglia. And for the future projections, I've used CNIP6 data. And I think it's all been bias corrected from what I can understand. So I hope that answers that question. So in terms of cropping strategy, as you said, I haven't looked at what crop suits what area, because that would definitely help us in managing our water resources effectively. For example, sugarcane, I don't know why we have any incentive to grow sugarcane given how much water it uses. So going forward, I think cropping strategy needs to be developed in terms of the water efficiency usage. It's something I haven't looked at as yet, but it's definitely something that in terms of food security issues, we should be heavily focused on.
Sumuru sir, please.
Faisal Zai, I just wanted to know how many simulations did you conduct when you are reflecting the 90th and the 100th percentile? And my second question is it possible to get some insight about the insured loss in Pakistan, particularly with regards to the floods impact that you can anticipate, because Pakistan and particularly Karachi is more insured population, especially on the property and casualty lines.
Okay, Philip, thank you for your question. So I think in terms of the scenarios, I think it's about 32 different models that we have in our multi-model ensemble. The same AP6 model, 32 models, and I think it's about 40 years of projections. So I think the projections run into the millions. It's when we look at the percentile, it can get quite data intensive. So I can take you through the data if we have time later on. But at the moment, I don't have that number of simulations exactly worked out. And you're right in terms of the exposures that we have insured losses. I don't have that number to hand at the moment. If somebody does, please shout. But it's a number which should be highlighted quite regularly. I think it's there have been massive floods. And this is a number which we've shared with international agencies, but it's not a number which I've seen come from, for example, my insurance clients this year.
Okay, Sumru sir, I think want to ask again. Okay, go ahead, please.
Sorry, I just wanted to make one more comment. I mean, absolutely, Faisal pointed it rightly that we need to highlight the insured loss, but I think it would be a good idea to have an assessment on the economic loss as well, so that overall picture can be reflected in terms of the movements on the 90th or the 10th percentile. How much impact would that come into action on the GDP basis? Thank you. That's it.
Yeah, I think once, as part of the strategy for managing, so I think I hate the word fighting global climate change, because you can't fight climate change. So we lose that fight anyway. So in terms of managing climate change risk, this is exactly what should happen. We should be gathering as much data as we can and then use that to project future losses. So at the moment, I don't think we even have an idea of what sort of data availability we have and what sort of data usage we have. So, for example, one of the things we need desperately is to be able to make sure we have water meters installed in every place, all different industries, so we can understand who's using how much water and then we can price it effectively. At the moment, it's just it's just a huge cross subsidy happening with probably the poorest people subsidizing the richest people who are using the same water.
Yeah, Taimur sir, please.
Dear Faisal Sir, my name is Taimur and I'm from Jung. My question, will you please share your presentation file with us at the end of this meeting?
Faisal sir, thank you so much. It's a really wonderful presentation and covering almost all the aspects of climate change and also its impact on food security as well as on also infrastructure. So thank you very much once again.